Hello, Filiberto Amati here, a partner at Amati & Associates in Warsaw. I am here today for another session of our research on the future of events with my partner in crime, Marco Bevolo. Welcome, Marco, who's going to introduce our esteemed guest of today.
Well, thank you, Filiberto. This time we have a guest from the best country in North America, as an old beer commercial used to claim. From Canada, from Nanaimo, in the Vancouver area, Dr. Joanne Schroeder, who joins us in her dual capacity as an academic leader of several programs in the Vancouver Island University, and also especially as the president of the UN World Leisure Organization. Joanne is going to share with us her points of view and their experiences in such capacity, institutional capacity. I also love to have her on board of our program because I have been a visiting scholar in Nanaimo at VIU, and I could appreciate the commitment, the achievements, and the true passion that I experienced there for very cutting edge sustainability topics, and for a program of social sustainability that is called Truth and Reconciliation, of which Joanne is going to tell us more. Please, Joanne, if you would like to introduce yourself. If I made a mistake in spelling out your name, please correct, as the Pope once said, please correct me when I'm wrong.
Thank you very much. So great to be here. I'm joining you, as Marco has said, from Nanaimo, based in the west coast of Canada on Vancouver Island. And I do acknowledge that I am on the Nanaimo First Nations people's land here on this part of the globe and the world. So it is a pleasure to be here with you. And I will actually correct you, Marco. I do not hold the status of doctor. So I am esteemed to receive that, but I am at a level of a master's, and so I do not want to falsely pass that along.
Actually, you gained more points in our consideration by not being a doctor, but it's a different discussion.
Or because you corrected Marco, it's already good enough.
Yeah, that's definitely.
So thank you. I am a faculty member in the Department of Recreation and Tourism here at Vancouver Island University, and I have been in that capacity for almost 20 years, but very industry connected. So while I'm in an academic environment, I really find myself, the easiest way is to identify myself as a pracademic, very involved in practice and very involved in academia. And it's not a term we hear often, but it helps to define the work that I do. So that is one capacity. We are what is called a special purpose teaching university. So teaching is foremost of what we do at the university, and complemented by research. The other title, I guess I come to you and join you with today, is, as Marco has said, the chair of the World Leisure Organization. And it's a pleasure to represent that organization on behalf of the board and the work that they do. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Would you like to just tell us, for our viewers, for a couple of minutes, what is the history, the mission, and the ambition of the World Leisure Organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really exciting to acknowledge that in 2022, the organization will celebrate 70 years since it was established in 1952 in the United States. It is a nonprofit organization with a global network. Members are involved, and its mission is to you know, promote leisure as a means of enhancing the human condition. And of course, we know that leisure, encompass it as an umbrella, encompasses a lot of things: events, games, sports, the creative economies of arts and culture, music, drama, play, tourism. So when we think of enhancing the human condition through leisure, it is broad, it is complex, and it has a very large scope. So when we think of, and I know we're going to get into this, but we think of, that it improves or has the potential to improve the human condition, and we think of the absence of leisure within this time of COVID, and specifically in a conversation of special events, the absence or that presence of, the sound of absence has had an impact, a ripple impact across the globe. So to come back to the organization and its mission is critical, and has been, based in education. So it is, largely made up of scholarship or academic, but of course, practice is embedded in that. And so, we have the organization is embedded into research, education, advocacy, and knowledge transfer. So that's a little bit. It is board driven, and the board has a global representation.
Well, thank you. Actually, the World Leisure Organization had in April their Congress.
Yeah.
And I would like to enter into the topic of business events from the point of view of your experience with the Congress. The Congress we discussed with one of our former guests, Dr. Robert Govers, who is one of our institutional experts, as is the chairman of the International Place Branding Association. And he explained to us already a little bit the mechanism of incentives, of academic conferences. And he told us how much academics apparently love to travel to places to go to a congress or to a conference. In his case, the IPBA conference was canceled last year and will be held in December 2021 in presence. They made this choice to only run it in presence for reasons that we discussed in our previous interview with Dr. Govers. The WLO made the choice to go fully virtual with the event hosted in China. Can you tell us about your experience with this edition of the World Leisure Organization Congress? Also from the point of view of stakeholders, also from the point of view of institutional representation. So how did it work for the actual members who attended, but how do you feel also was your experience as the president of the organization and the chairwoman of the board?
Yes. Well, Dr. Glover was able to describe the academic conference or congress in a way that really helps to understand the parallel sessions that happen at a conference, the importance of scholarly involvement and how that works for an academic to travel. This particular congress was to be hosted in the fall of 2020, and it was postponed to April of 2021. And you are correct, it did run, but it ran as a hybrid model. So it was hosted in China, in Beijing, Pinggu, and they were able to have face-to-face involvement at the Congress, those that were able to travel and be present. So the host community did a very good job of balancing the hybrid model. It was a first-time experience for them in creating it on that that platform or placing it on that platform. And while there were some bumps and bruises along the way in the preparation of that, I'll speak to the experience of it. In the end, you were able to participate in sessions, both opening ceremony and closing ceremony and parallel sessions with people present in the room. So you were not just able to, I mean, it was recorded, so you could watch it at another time, but you were able to actually be there and be present with people in the room and any dialogue or questions that may have happened. So I think that went very well in the end. And while the numbers were obviously much smaller than they were hoping for, people were able to interact with the content. Now, your question of stakeholder, that's an altogether different impact and experience. I mean, if we think of, just for instance, how did the change of a Congress to move virtual impact? Well, you think of bylaws regarding annual general meetings. Typically, there is, in relation to a Congress, an annual general meeting of members. How now do you do that? How do you engage the member? How do you engage voting? What about participation? And so you see that end of a Congress going virtual being impacted by bylaws. The connection to emotional contact and face-to-face contact obviously is impacted. But one of the things that's interesting when we think of delegates is you had this increased connection by the emerging or the young scholar that are very keen to be digitally involved. They're very keen to multitask. They're very keen to be taking, parallel sessions at the same time, grabbing little bits because they like lots of bits of information fast and received in short bites. And our feedback was, really positive from that emerging scholar and young practitioner that was looking for lots and bits and pieces. Obviously, there's sponsorship embedded in there too, which is challenging, and maybe we pull that into later. But it's just devastating how you see the local community, the industry, the stakeholders, the sponsors impacted in a way that they just can't participate in the same way in a virtual world.
Well, I am feeling definitely intimidated and shy because not only Joanne corrected me, but she also watched our earlier tape to live on LinkedIn. So I need some time to recollect myself and get myself together. I would like to pass the ball to Filiberto on the digital side and on the demographic side. You know that Filiberto has been my co-author for the World Leisure Journal, where we wrote together about the blurring of leisure and work. I presented the same research to your audiences in Nanaimo, I think on at least one occasion during my visiting scholarship. Filiberto, please take over. I need to somehow regain my confidence in myself.
No worries, Michael. Thank you very much. So very simply, I'm interested in understanding, because I think it's clear the way you presented it, there is also a demographical, being a digital first type of technology user or consumer or prosumer or academic in this sense. So what do you see as effect of this pandemic has changed, and we will go back to the notion of mental health and the role of leisure later. But how is this pandemic changing the way we are going to be using technology for events across the board? What do you expect? Because the truth of the matter is that a lot of people think of going back to the reality which was before, but we know that this is not the traditional, this pandemic was not a traditional shock. There is no going back to the initial curve. We are now developing into a new reality. So what do you expect to be tangible examples, or you think, you feel, you've seen, of how technology is going to play a role in events in general, business events in specific, in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. Great question. I think there's no going back, in my opinion. I think the hybrid model and the moving forward is how we will see that change. Let me give you an example. When we went virtual in September in an academic environment, so I'm going to just shift there for a moment. We had 150 graduate students that were virtually across the world, and we do an orientation. We did an event which was an orientation where we all took on an avatar, and we went online and we had a virtual orientation as avatars. Now, learning to move and manipulate an avatar was super fun for me, but it was fascinating. And while there were some glitches, we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. The time zones were some challenges, but we worked around that. And it was actually a very positive experience. That event did not bring 1,500 students, which might have been what we would have had face-to-face on campus, but we are now in the planning stage of that event for September of 2022. We will not go back to a fully face-to-face. We will hybrid plan that event with more than 1,500 students. We will include a hybrid type of experience. So I don't think small scale, we might not require that sort of technology or a digital component in a small scale. But there's no question in my mind that we will move into hybrid components of events going forward. And it will actually be requested. Will it be required? Maybe not, but will it be requested? You bet. You will have people say, can I observe that later? Can I participate in some way without being there? Can I participate in the pre-concert, virtually, rather than actually traveling there? I don't think there is any way, in my opinion, that there is a going back. It is a going forward in a hybrid. Will it go virtually? All virtual? No, I think you will see some of that.
Mm-hmm. So follow-up question, because this is a very interesting point in terms of how technology is changing, how we're going to be using technology to readapt to the new reality. But on the other end, I think that there is an underlying change in business model as well, from a university or an event organizer point of view. Let me give you an example. I did my master's degree at the Business School in Barcelona 15, 17 years ago now. And the tuition fee for the 2-year program is fairly expensive, so to speak. The same if you go to Ivy League schools in the US for your MBA, London, IMD, Istituto d'Impresa, LBS, INSEAD, and so on and so forth. The usual suspects. And of course, I learned a lot from the teaching and from the analysis of the cases and from the professors. But I also learned a lot from the interaction. A great value to me of the MBA, it's the network I have built, being in Barcelona with people from all over the world.
Yes.
And that to me justifies the price tag.
Right.
As a human, development, managerial development, and there's a personal fun as well, because the leisure part is important when you do your master's degree as well, by the way. But of course, with this technological or COVID-induced tech trend, part of that value creation dilutes. So business schools will need to, or business schools in general, but schools, colleges will have to recreate probably a new type of, value creation process to be able to appropriate, I don't say the same value, but some part of the same value.
Yeah.
What's your thinking about that?
Yeah. Well, I 100% agree in that recreate is a key word that you have stated. And there is no question that the value of networking face-to-face is debatable if the value of networking virtually has the same sense, the same feel, the same impact, and the same outcome. Now, at the root of leisure is connection. And so we are going to continue to desire that and need that as human beings. So we need to be connected face to face. My enjoyment of sharing a meal with you is different than this kind of a conversation. So we will desire that. But I think your point in there, and when we think of the World Leisure Organization as a global organization, we will have to recreate how we feel a more personal connection virtually, a more realistic connection. Disney created a visceral experience that when you go there, you smell things, you can have an actual connection to that, more than just our visual senses, all the senses. Will we have to not recreate, but create a sense of that senses connection through networks? I think we're going to have to figure that one out, because not only the practicality of budgets and convenience and flexibility of the virtual world and the impacts of the carbon footprint of traveling, we are going to have to figure that one out. I don't have the answer, but I agree with you. It is a recreate the value proposition of that network piece. But networking's not going away. Networking is enhanced.
No, I agree. But it's going to be difficult to be in an alumni reunion with 6,000 people, let's be honest. Right. So there is also the serendipity part, which is going to be missing in terms of bumping into someone or meeting a friend of a friend, or that needs to be somehow remodeled or recreated.
Yeah. A colleague, actually, Suzanne Marco, participated in a conference, a virtual conference. It wasn't hybrid, it was completely virtual.
Suzanne de la Barre, let's mention, she is actually a faculty member of Vancouver Island University in the North.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. As a colleague, experienced a conference and had an amazing experience. What she felt was a very realistic. So you could actually walk in a room and feel like you sort of bumped into someone. And so I think embedded in all of it is just a sense of interaction, of a more realistic platform usage, software, and but there's also in there that digital fatigue. Yeah. Do we really want to keep going in that kind of a virtual world?
Yeah. And actually, I like your somber tone in this conclusion, because I would like to bring, as Joanne has heard that I'm a former scholar of psychoanalysis. I love trauma and everything that is dark and difficult as a kind of preference and interest. You mentioned the impact on the stakeholders and of course also the impact on the city. When an event goes virtual, it means that the city loses a lot in terms of reputation, in terms of visitors, in terms of all the collateral businesses from restaurants to hotels, in terms of social media presence. What do you think the strategic impact will be of this accelerated digitalization of events, and how would the WLO possibly react to this impact? Do you think, for example, we mentioned in past conversations Milan or the city where I live, Eindhoven, they have design weeks. Now it's being announced for September, a special edition of the Milan Design Week curated by Stefano Boeri that is supposed to be a unique event to mark the rebirth of the city in a way, just like the reopening of La Scala Theatre. So there are, but at the same time, Milan didn't have the design week for almost 2 years, 1 year and a half. Eindhoven last year had a totally virtual Dutch Design Week. And what do you think the loss? What do you think the impact is? And what do you think the reaction can be?
Yeah. Well, I can personally relate to the Dutch Design Week and the experience at Eindhoven because I have been there. Would I want to experience that virtually? Could that replace the experience that I had? No, I don't think so personally. Could it be enhanced with a virtual component? Sure. So when you, at the root of your question is the impact to, numerous actors, stakeholders, corporate world, business sector, hospitality, hotel. So when we think of the World Leisure Organization that is embedded in the human condition through leisure, one of the things that the pandemic has done, it's made us, it's neutralized the globe in a sense that, realizing that we are interconnected and we have this global civilization that's connected. So when I think about, let's just take sponsorship for a moment. I've been involved in event planning for years, and there was the time when you would go to an event and you would get the bag, right? That some sort of a bag or a package, and it was full of stuff, local context. A restaurant you could go to, an event you could experience, a tourism destination, a festival, or something that was happening during that time that you were there. As budgets changed, that seemed to reduce, and people were saying, I don't want all this stuff. I don't want a pen. I don't want a piece of paper. I just don't need that. And at least within a North American context, and I'll loop this back to the World Leisure Organization, we saw that sponsorship take a different role. So for instance, if you think about a whale watching festival, a sponsor now comes on, and they could be virtual, and they support the cause of the whale watching event. So they are interested as a sponsor in, healthy waters and healthy oceans. So they're connected to a cause. So if we move that into impact at a World Leisure Organization level and think of events that we could continue to have and impact, I think we have to come back to Filiberto's comment is we have to think, and I don't have the answer, today, but we have to think of those impacts differently. Could now you have the opportunity of not just that event happening within, the Dutch Design Week within the Netherlands, but now you've got a whole global connection where people want to connect to that cause or that issue. And I think there's huge opportunity there in a different way than maybe we saw impacts or benefits to our region. Now it can be, we have to think of it to the region differently, but we can think of it broader. connected to the purpose or the mission of that particular event. So for the World Leisure Organization, we're really thinking about this larger the glue, the conduit that connects us. So what are those benefits that we were looking for at a local level, and how can we enhance that at a global level? Not easy.
Filiberto, it's a fantastic. It's a fantastic answer. Well, I would like to make a small detour before we get into another section of our interview, because I heard before from the conversation digital fatigue, mental health. Filiberto, you did quite some work in the digital domain. He's actually my guru for everything digital. What is your view on the human side that we can comment with Joanne of the personal sustainability element?
I think that well, for me, the first comment is that from COVID-19, I actually learned how important leisure is for our mental balance. And I never, and I worked, Joanne, in wines and spirits, in beverages. I worked with, entertainment industry, with, sports and events. And I never could make the connection of the strength of the importance between my mental health and the leisure, and the fact that you need leisure as part of your being, because you need to connect, and there are cycles. So for me, that was the key part. On the leisure side, I think that on, let's say, leisure towards mental health, I think that the important still, it's not the role technology plays, it's the role we all need to play as World Leisure Organization, as academics, as practitioners, as fathers, and as advisors, as managers, as leaders, in understanding how we can help people now that that notion of leisure is changing. And the reality is changing beyond the role of technology, because technology, as usual, it helps for 70% and it damages you for the remaining 30. So the Zoom fatigue. Should this meeting really be a meeting? No, as an advisor, I realized very quickly that many of my customers realized that some of these 3 days travel for a 7-hour workshop kind of was crazy completely, because we could be more effective to do the 7-hour workshop in 3-4 sessions of 2 hours on Zoom. But then there is a lot of Zoom meetings which are just like, okay, why are we even here discussing? We're not discussing. Why are you telling us about what's happening in your mailbox?
It's a point of purpose in a way, and that's what you, Joanne, that was the one of the lines that you were bringing up is the point of purpose, the point of cause, the point of connecting to a higher trigger, maybe in the system of values. Do you see this kind of switching from the personal sustainability level of the mental balance? Do you see this happening in society? And if so, do you see sustainability being taken on board besides the environmental cause in the event industry and through the event industry, Joanne?
Right. Great question. What we have seen emerge is the conversation around the wellness economy, like I have never seen before in my time, and I have been in the field forever. And the connection between leisure and the health resiliency of communities, of individuals, of organizations has been heightened. So the conversation has been heightened, and conversation like wellness economy has been heightened. Also has sustainability come into question, and it has been for some time. Of is it okay to just sustain, or are we moving into a regenerative, right? And so that is the other buzzword or conversation that we're seeing happen in relation to sustainability. And then also the conservation economy is a very big conversation for us in a coastal community on the west part of Canada, where our marine and oceans and air and nature and wildlife are critical to both our tourism product and to us personally as a value. So at the root of your question, Marco, is sustainability. I think that sustainability sustainability looks at economic, environment, and social. That is not going to change in events. It is going to be enhanced, in my opinion. People will, I think, the events sector will come back, and it will come back huge, I think, in time when the world is healthy.
So you think it will be like an elastic in a way?
I think it will come back in the sense that people want to travel and they want to learn, they want to understand culture, they want to see experiences, and they want to be together with people. Will it come back to what it was? No. But at the root of, no, it will be different. But at the root of it, of sustainability, I think you'll see people will want to have an impact differently in how they participate, how they consume, how they behave. And so they're going to think about the regenerative piece of what does it mean if I get on into an airplane? What does it mean if I come into this highly populated, dense destination or event? And you have to realize, as a Canadian, I think it's important to put that into context. We do not live in population density. Vancouver Island is 800,000 people, the size, slightly smaller than the size of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is 17 million. So, the globe thinks differently about population density and how we experience events, but sustainability is not going away. I think it's changing. And we're going to think about the circular economy and the regenerative aspect of events differently.
Well, Filiberto and you mentioned as a Canadian, and I like to make the transition to one of the questions I love the most, because we like to also engage our esteemed guests on topics that are slightly more sometimes personal, sometimes regional, and Filiberto and I, as Italians, of course, the kind of story goes, Filiberto is from Naples, I'm from Turin, so we don't engage in it, but the two cities have an endless string of mutual accusations about which one was nastier to the other. So Filiberto can testify of that. But as Italians, we have a feeling of our place of origin, our genius loci, that is a bit embedded in us. So I realized once a car designer, a friend of mine who went to Japan to live, told me probably our aesthetic instinct as Italians as an imprint from growing up with the architecture and the city centers that we have around. And especially, I like to say it as a joke, but Italians tend to think that everything was invented in Italy. So the law, the bridges, there is a little bit this folklore, this anecdotal And you mentioned, and I learned with great pleasure, and I became a fanatic enthusiast of the truth and reconciliation policies. But you mentioned that you acknowledge the ownership of the land where you are actually, where your house is, and where. So can you explain us a little bit what the truth and reconciliation process is, how it fits in sustainability, and how events fit into it?
Yeah, great. Okay, well, it's important to acknowledge as I come into a little bit of explanation of Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada that I'm a non-Indigenous Canadian woman, and so my experience, comes within that frame. But it is exciting to know the work that has happened here in Canada with regards to the Truth and Reconciliation. So. We have a history in Canada where government developed policies to eliminate sort of some of the rich and diverse language and culture of our First Nations people. And so a process started to make to right those wrongs by unearthing, what happened and how to move forward, which is what we call Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. It was a 6-year process, and in 2015, a final report was created. That final report came out with 94 calls to action. And since 2015, those calls to action have been moving forward. So I want to reference your question with specifically one call to action, and it is, like I say, there's 94 calls to action, and this particular call to action is under language and culture, which I will bring in the conversation of events. There were 5 calls to action, and I just want to reference just a few of them underneath that call. Realizing the diversity and the distinct tribal regions, there's 3 of them on Vancouver Island, and there's 50 First Nations. We have a very, very, in the world, a very diverse and dynamic Indigenous population here on the west coast of Canada. So when we think of language and culture, one of those calls to action was that Aboriginal languages are a fundamental and valued element of Canadian culture and society, and there's an urgency to preserve them. And many languages are becoming lost. The other is the revitalization and preservation of language. And finally, this one is a strong one. The preservation, revitalization, and strengthening of Aboriginal language and cultures are best managed by Aboriginal people and communities. So we have seen a huge growth within Aboriginal tourism, but just cultural, the creative economies of culture, language. And one of the things that's exciting, I mean, that's been happening, for some time, but predominantly in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been huge growth. And when we think of language and culture, that has been embedded into events. So you are seeing language, the elders teaching language to their youth, and those youth are then speaking that language within special events, whether they are cultural events or a tourism product or a wildlife touring or some form of an event, and very large cultural events. So you are seeing an event being used for the benefit of that strengthening of that culture and that language. And so sustainability is the conversation, but it really is regenerative. It's restoring and enhancing and sustaining for a long term. And obviously the pandemic is hugely impactful, devastating right now, because we cannot experience culture and language virtually. and particularly within our Indigenous population, their strength is in storytelling. Their strength is within the richness, and the virtual world cannot create that for us. So when we think of it through the lens of special events, it has been devastating to this particular issue of truth and reconciliation and the ability to use events to enhance education and language and culture through events. It's decimated. But an amazing, resilient people. And while we wait for the world to heal, it will come back strong.
Well, I think before asking Filiberto his comment from the point of view of his experience, I really want to say that I experienced the Nanaimo context, the Vancouver Island University, and I would definitely like to go back and to learn more, even more about the First Nation culture. It's an exceptional, and also from the point of view of mental balance, the presence of the First Nation elders on campus, the various businesses that Professor Suzanne Labarre brought us in the Vancouver City Lab to explore, where the culture becomes business, but in a respectful and a sort of intrinsic way within the values of the culture. It has been, I traveled all over the world, but it has been really, I don't want now to sound like I'm making a commercial. I'm not paid by the Tourist Commission of Nanaimo, but it's really unique. And I wanted to ask Filiberto a comment from the point of view of the authenticity and what we discussed also in the past.
Well, I think actually more than a comment, I have two questions for Jen on that. And on one question is, how can we use that level of empathy to bring it to other level of business and making that an economic engine? So what can we learn from that experience that we can expand in other areas of leisure? And, bracket question on that. And is this the way we change, leading question, is this the way we change mass market tourism for good?
And events. And
exactly. Mass market and events for good. As Italians, so we stopped sending big ships into Venice, which is destroying Venice, for example. So that's basically one core question, which is the empathy side. And the other side, though, is how do we avoid that becomes, speaking of Europeans, a political tool? Because the diversity of languages, the European Union, by the way, it's built around the notion of it's the Europe of the regions. Okay, we recognize a number of languages, but we respect every languages. Hence, Catalan, Valencian, Galician, Basque, L'Occitan, Portuguese, and Portugnol, and so on and so forth. And we respect the dialects, for example. But they're often used not as a way of promoting a culture, but as a way to, at least in Europe right now, promote political discourse and disunity. So rather than being all diverse together, we should be all far apart because we are, diverse. So, two questions.
Yeah. Boy, you ask hard questions.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
we needed to do so because we are so amazingly handsome that we needed to put a bit of twist. Well, I hope the viewers get the humor. Otherwise, they will crucify me.
Okay. Well, so your first question is of empathy. Is this a way to change mass tourism? Was a question in there.
Mass events.
Mass events. Mass events.
Tourism, mass events.
Yeah.
The Disneyfication of leisure and experience. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's what I can say to you from this sense of truth and reconciliation and our First Nations people in Canada and my experience again as a non-Indigenous person is that the scale of human economy is that we are in the biosphere we're embedded in is so important. And so again, this idea that we are connected. Is empathy artificial when we learn something new in we have a new knowledge and then are we empathetic because somehow it feels like it's the right thing to do? We've maybe created a wrong and now we need to make it right. I think we're responsible for shared history and we are responsible for shared future. So when you ask the question of authenticity, I think at the core of that is a human dynamic, is that when you experience something small, that authentic, or what we talk about authenticity, it's so genuine that we connect on a different level in an event or an experience. It's human level that is difficult sometimes to duplicate in a very large setting. So are we going to see smaller events going forward? I think you are going to see individuals, yes, look for that kind of a personal connection to learning, to knowledge, to travel, to culture, to language, that it's not so much about size, it's about connection to a human spirit that can be done. So is it the answer? I don't know if it's the answer, but I know it is a truth embedded in special event experiences that we can't negate, we can't push aside, we can't say it's artificial, it's real. And it's that human piece. I am connected in what is an Indigenous ecotourism certificate training and working with Indigenous students only in place-based experience education. We have had to go virtual, and we cannot do the same level of what we need to do when we go into place and into space, which has context culturally. You just can't duplicate that, and it's so powerful and so real, and so impactful. Yeah. So I think that there is something embedded in there that we have to continue to figure out. And to the second part of your question, which is, embedded in a political sense. We are humans. Let's come back to that. Politics is never going to change. In the sense, sorry, let me say that again. Not that it's not going to change, but it also is embedded in society. And so are we going to use new knowledge, new information in ways that push agendas, whether bad or good or seen neutral? I think it's not going away, and it's going to continue to be used. Can we use it from a leisure perspective to enhance human condition? Yes, I think we can. And I think in a leadership role in the World Leisure Organization, I think we need to do that in a way that goes back to our mission, the impact of improving human condition through events. It can be pushed and used.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to close with the future, because as a pra-academic, you are really a sort of conduit between two worlds, the world of abstract reflection and theories and the world of practice and pragmatic solutions. As the president of World Leisure Organization, it is almost intrinsic in your job description to think about the future. You have various initiatives and various, well, I'm an independent member of the World Leisure Organization, and we had several contacts with Filiberto. We have the intention to come back to you with potential contributions to the journal and so on. But where do you see the evolution of the future of events of World Leisure Organization as a body, your role in the World Leisure Organization of events, and how can education support the vision of the future that you consider preferable? So I'm trying to tie your vision of the future in your multiple roles in one question.
So I think that we can't just approach this from small term solutions or short term solutions, small or short term. We really have to look at that from we have to look at this from a long-term perspective. So what is future? What is it going to look at? Well, we've been hearing this for a while. Shop local, think local, buy local, be local. We're in our bubbles now. We're in bubbles of bubbles, and things are small. What that has brought is a sense of community that is very different. And, this is just an anecdotal, very small bit here, but you are seeing a huge impact out of the housing market here in North America. Houses, people are realizing they can work from their homes. So the house buying industry requiring an office in their space, in their homes. And you are seeing people, sell in large urban places that maybe desire to live in more rural and realize, hey, I can do that and still do what I've been doing. And so this embedded in that is community. And I don't think that community is going away anytime soon. And what we have learned is the importance of it as we have missed it. So if you think about, the future, I think the pandemic has made us think local. It has made us think about the importance of community and strengthening community. It has made us think globally about the globe as a community. And so the idea of going back is not going to happen in my mind. And professionally, I have had the most growth in disruption, right on the edge of something. Discomfort, yes, but growth, yes. And as an organization with the World Leisure, in a leadership role in the World Leisure Organization and also involved in education, I think, we're at the edge of things that can be different.
Sorry,
and it's discomfortable, but it allows innovation.
Yeah.
And we say, well, there's new coming. There's always been new coming. Well, we need to be nimble. We need to change. We've always been needing to be nimble and needing to be changed. So is this really new? Well, it's definitely different from a pandemic perspective and how we're experiencing it around the world, but it pushes us into an edge of how we learn, how we educate, how events have a different ability from their purpose. What is our purpose, and how can we move that purpose forward, both local community and both global?
Well, thank you, Joanne. Absolutely. Thank you for being patient with my mistakes and my Italian humor that you learned to leverage in our shared experience with your students in Nanaimo. I would like to ask Filiberto, any closing remarks or?
No, I just wanted to thank Joanne, and I think that I am leaving this conversation with this idea of community as probably at the center of this purpose that probably we need to transition leisure into this new industry that needs to be future oriented, sustainable, local, and of course playing such an important role in our, not only in economic sense, but in our mental health and wellness sense. So I wanted to thank you, Joanne, very much for your time. It was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Marco, thank you as well. And, ad maiora, and hopefully we will have a chance to redo this in the future.
To the next one.
Thank you for the pleasure of joining you. Thank you very much.